Every word you say online has so much weight, doesn't it? It feels like anything you say can and will be used against you. It feels like everything could be preened over and torn down and reconstructed, skimmed, eviscerated, knitted into something that you never intended. There's so much information, it's overwhelming, and you come at things from a billion different angles trying to ascertain how other people will take it before you even make a single keystroke, and those feelings leave us paralyzed a lot. And it's scary. And we're supposed to have pride, especially this month. But honestly, expressing ourselves with the risk of being truly visible has carried a weight that it never felt like before. But here we are presenting you our shell and finally talking again about media. Even if it's in a format that is ramshackle. Fluffbyte presents something about the digital circus before it's over. It's June 4th, 2026, and the official start date of the digital circus film run is happening. There are people who've seen it now. And of course there were leaks, and so some people knew what happened even before. But somehow it's happened. Liking cartoons for so long, liking animation, is so. There's an experience of it that feels antithetical to closure. As people, we all like things wrapped up in a neat little bow, but your favorite cartoons growing up probably never got a conclusion, never got wrapped up nicely. So if you did, cancellations are common. Cancellations are common now, and not just in animation, but animation feels particularly undervalued by capitalism. There's this stuff with HBO Max and deleting stuff like Summer Camp Island and Infinity Train, and not leaving it anywhere to be like officially viewable, that people had to pirate if they wanted to see that sort of stuff. How often animation gets thrown out with the trash. How being labeled as something specifically for kids, it's sort of treated as lesser, even though the stories that can be told in animation are can be anything. And so for a lot of people, Digital Circus getting a theatrical run is so monumental, of being able to distribute in such a way internationally without having to go through the usual gatekeepers. In that context, is important for not just the industry of animation, but the craft of animation, not just the fandom of animation, but like the culture. But at the same time, the specter of capitalism is still strong. And a lot of people have talked about indie fatigue or pilot fatigue specifically. People are seeing a pattern and putting it into the framework that a lot of stuff is being put into. If you see a pattern of something, you can slide into the framework of slop. And so a lot of toxic sentiment also exists. And with Digital Circus now finishing and getting its YouTube premiere later this month, it's important to reflect on. Especially with so many other indies looking to Gooseworks and looking to glitch animations and what projects actually finishing represent. Which is funny because of the hunger for more and more and more people asking for more content, for more Digital Circus. In the days of like episode 2 and 3 being the most current, I remember it was a very easy conversation to fall into, talking with random people about the Digital Circus of, oh wait, they're only gonna do one season? Really? But it's so good. They could keep it going for a while. Of a desire for a sitcomification. But it was harder to see the shape of the Digital Circus and the what it was doing. Because sometimes it's a fun thing and you don't think much of the thing as a whole, especially while it's forming. And so, especially in the time where it was only the pilot, fandom about the Digital Circus felt a little especially autistic. Like, specifically in the at the level of fandom we're in, where we know people who ken characters of major cartoons, um, and we're not exactly immune to this like hyper concentration of fandom. We've certainly experienced it. We've experienced it with Deltarune. We've experienced it with Amori, amongst other things. And we remember that after the pilot, we got a poster for the Digital Circus, and we felt this weird thing of, well, the thing is free, and I have this $20, and I can send it and get this poster, and it's supporting the show. I hope it continues going. We didn't know about Glitch until Digital Circus. We didn't see Murder Drones until after seeing the pilot of Digital Circus. And we've been hopeful and optimistic about the continuation of indie animation and people surviving, especially as is very hard to feed oneself. And sometimes people think very pragmatically and can't spend a lot of money on entertainment. And you think to yourself as an artist, why am I doing this? I am ultimately making a luxury. And sometimes when we see something in front of our eyes, it's easy to separate the art from the content of the people who make it, and assume that because it's popular or because they've seen it, that there's a level of grandiosity to it. There's this like parasocial distillation of a sense of fame and importance, while at the same time the people who work on your favorite show is even like, say, Jujutsu Kaisen, might not be able to eat every day. But it's easy to forget that when you have stars in your eyes and you go, wow, that's so many views. And so it's easy to become disillusioned. And advertising feels very hostile now. It feels... It doesn't feel... Advertising feels more evil than ever. Maybe not always the things advertised, but just the notion of advertising. And I think that sucks. Not because I think advertising is net good, but the concept of letting people know about your vocation or what you do or what you make is sort of different than when a company does it, it feels like. But you also become a company when you start selling stuff. When you start filing as a business on your taxes. And so even individuals have to treat themselves like companies. And even when you know that someone is a single person, you can still look at them through the process and see them less as human. At least that's why we think it's so easy for people to treat creators of the things they love so badly and hold such toxic expectations of them. But it's also kind of funny because the parasociality, it's a risk. There's a risk that the parasociality can turn toxic, but at the same time, as a creator, you need that parasociality to a degree. You don't want sycophants to disrespect you, but you want people who care enough to elevate the work, to review it, to talk about it. Making fan works, that's kind of advertisement too. It's soft power. So as an artist, you have to cultivate soft power, and it feels weird and it feels invasive. At least to us. And there is a model for advertising your works. Not just how Glitch advertises their stuffed animals or merch after episodes, but how if there is merch of a video game that you like, especially a small video game, it probably has this tiny plush because there's a specific company that makes small, cheap plushes that resemble whatever you want them to. And so a lot of creators use that, and that's like a huge revenue source. But it's only useful if people want it. And as a creator, maybe you want to just make enough living off of the thing itself, and you don't want to make a t-shirt shop or whatever. But unfortunately, there's a give and a take if you were trying to survive off of being an artist. Then there's always going to be times where you have to compromise in a way that feels like it betrays your morals for the sake of stability. Not that artists are the only ones who have to deal with that. But everyone is pushed to be a brand now. And it's really easy to look at the people who are successful in the things that you want to do through the lens of your identity and you not being a good example of someone who made it. That's a little of a divergence. But the fact that Gooseworks is trans is something that paints a lot of our perception of how Goose is treated online and how the runaway success of the digital circus culturally has been taken. And there's always some meritocratic success story that can attach to an artist, or with enough success, auteurship may be foisted upon someone and they become so elevated that comparing yourselves to them feels like an indictment of your own hubris. And that's why putting artists on a pedestal, or putting anyone on a pedestal, is dangerous. And so, someone like us tends to crave success, but not too much success. There's some quote about to sustain yourself, you don't need like a huge audience, you just need 1,000 dedicated fans. Maybe it reflects a desire to be loved, but on very specific terms. That relates to our fear about being exposed to the world. Really about virality and localism. It feels like we went away for so long because of it. And could really never get back a grip on our uploads because of it. And that wasn't even fully the effects of living that life. It was just the fear of it. And also, you don't need to be big to be a lol cow. But the bigger the better, I suppose. It is quite dualistic that the same forces that can keep one afloat can also destroy one. But even we have to advertise ourselves to attract fandom, to inspire clippers or folks to feel benefited enough by our art to want to see us continue making it in a material way. Maybe that's also why the Digital Circus final call feels so different than other stuff we've been so engrossed in online. We got our tickets today, and we're not seeing it till Sunday, but to decide to go out physically to see this thing, wanting to be part of the ritual of having seen it in theaters for fandom reasons, but also for personal reasons, also for cinephile reasons. And also for trying to not have to worry about the anxiety of spoilers reasons. Participating in the material world. It feels like when we got that poster, they brought it into our house. This thing that we watch online. This thing that is like ethereal. Especially because it's on YouTube. You know, there's always a chance that we won't even post this. We'll put so much intention into it. And then something feels wrong. We've been examining that feeling lately. There's a lot of fear. And sometimes it doesn't even matter what it is. There's always a reason to not share, to not post, to hide yourself. Being exposed, being vulnerable feels like putting a hand near a hot stove. We took a break from recording to eat and take care of our body and hype ourselves up again. It's actually pretty embarrassing how hard it is to create sometimes and have that be seen and be okay with whatever reaction you get. One might even say it's the fear of cringe. But being a Digital Circus fan is sort of cringe in a way. People made to be cartoon characters turned into that. Do they have to be that? What do they choose to be? What do we choose to be? Escaping from yourself. Of course, in a Digital Circus, it's an inversion because there's an understanding of the self for all the characters. But it hurts. It exposes their insecurities. They have yet to integrate their shadow. And that's part of what we like about it, the challenge. The fatigue. Of course, Digital Circus isn't the first thing to make someone feel human, even in an absurd world, under absurd circumstances. Considering we're gonna be seeing it in a theater and that's how it's gonna end, we can't help but think about End of Evangelion, since toxic fandom affected that production too, or rather the community of Evangelion fans and negativity out of the fandom sort of exploded. There's like graffiti and stuff like that on the Gainax studios, death threats, stuff like that. Would imagine that if it had been a cultural moment when the internet was bigger, then we would have seen even more of that. Of course, we barely existed physically at the time, so we can only go through the retrospective view of others on it. So that's why we thought even more that it was valuable to document, at least for us, our thoughts on Digital Circus before we finished. Of course, we tried not to let that feeling of importance on how it is first digested control us completely, because it's the sort of thing that can kind of fold into an OCD-ish need to watch things a certain way, view things a certain way, of only being able to experience media in certain contexts, and you just kick it down the line like a video game you really want to play, but you don't really have the time for it because you don't want to give it your full attention. Well, you do want to give it your full attention, but you know you won't if you do it right now. And trying to force yourself not to play something while second screening. It's hard. We've been watching Digital Circus episodes today to remind us of everything. But we're doing it while doing other things, like cooking. Digital Circus kind of reminds us of My Little Pony. Not every piece of media is about learning something, about some moral. And I wouldn't say that Digital Circus is heavy-handed with what it's trying to express and what someone could learn from it, but considering it is a show aimed towards adults, despite its all ages popularity, of course, and the all ages appeal is sort of baked in, it's not so dark. It's not, it's just dark enough. Though we've yet to see. Artists who are the leads on big projects have so much weight on them that makes interacting with their own fandom sort of a strain. And seeing this at the beginning of an artist breaking in feels different than, say, Evangelion hitting its 30th anniversary recently. While a new anime has been announced and the original creator isn't working on it. certainly still involved with the franchise, but letting it be directed by another person was sort of a big deal. And it reminds us that even if you do love something that you made, sometimes you just want to be done with it. And then you think about the escapism, or at least we do. That feeling of, I want this to go on forever. Makes us think of Deltarune in that way. Because everything has to have an end. It might be clean, it might be messy, but it does have to end. We hope we make a lot more videos than this. But there's always a chance that any video could be our last. And with so few and far between, that feels so much more likely these days. But I think the digital circus was more than just a comfort. In dark times, episode 2 with Gummy Goo, talking about nihilism and in meaning, and finding meaning in the present and the lives of the people around you. Or with Pomni and being worried about being forgotten and disregarded and not being able to hack it in the circus. Stuff with Jax flattening people to archetypes. Something that we find very common as a Chinibyo-ish response to how hard life can be or how complicated people can be. Flanderizing yourself, making yourself the most extreme version of yourself. Making yourself into a cartoon. Which is a stark feeling to be aware of, since being a VTuber we do that too. More so than other creators might, just by the sheer nature of it. We feel that the expression of ourselves is somewhere in between the material context of us, or what people would call the real us, and the things that we create and how we present and the things we choose to display. But in the circus, you don't get to choose. No one in this world. No one in this world gets to choose who they are. Isn't that right, Chris? Pomni's struggle with agency is really interesting too. Especially metatextually. Because of Pomni being the one character who looks like a child. How Goose made sure that she let everyone know the canon ages of the characters and making sure that all the characters were adult aged. A comfort to people who may be put off if it was not the case. the infantilization of Pomni is something that we pay a lot of attention to because Pomni is our favorite character design wise and even personality wise. Emotionally flexible, resilient, but still allowed to be scared. Pomni sort of acts as a witness to everything. As the newest member of the circus, the one least used to it, but also trying really hard to acclimate in a way that is pro-social. It's really nice to see. It's a weird feedback loop because once you see Pomni and once you see a character in a certain context, it's hard to shake it. The stink of Pomni as a fail girl from the first episode, or the interpretation of the first episode, leaves in one's mouth, was really hard to shake off. But in discussions of Pomni and the fandom, it's been obvious that it's not so simple. And her interpersonal intelligence, like her emotional intelligence, is probably one of the best in the show. Which really juxtaposes someone's first view of her based on her appearance as a jester. Although a jester that is understanding of other people, I could almost act as a therapist. Is not a foreign concept. The Fool is full of possibilities after all. A lot of people like the fail girl archetype because of the same reasons people like a bimbo archetype. Or a juvenile archetype, or the kid character archetype, because it's freeing. There's less of a burden. You can be more silly, you can be more free. Of course, there is a fetishization of the fail girl, in the sense of a moe figure to take care of, to look out for. Someone who is incapable must be taken care of. But Pomni isn't that. But even we thought that she was going to be a different character than she ended up being. And identifying with characters like her, or Kobeni in Chainsaw Man, or Shinji in Evangelion, is sort of reinforces your own view of being pathetic. So, especially as someone who also has a lot in common with Ragatha, and wanting to be a conduit for other people's stability, wanting to help people, and sometimes doing so at the expense of ourselves. and sometimes doing it on reflex regardless of the surrounding circumstances, or if we can handle it, or if it's really needed in that moment. It's nice to see a character who can have a balance, who can reach out to people and help them, but not take too much away from themselves, who can have their AT filled up and have a separation. So whereas other characters sort of feed into our own sense of stagnation and being a certain type of way, Pomni not just having a character arc about autonomy and connection, but also not actually turning out to be as unstable or unreliable as the first episode implies that she is, has been immensely important to us. Of course, the footage we have looping right now is from an episode about Gangle, and that's another character that we identify with. We identify with all the characters, actually. It's to some degree. And there's elements of the human condition in all of them. The different anxieties, the different pains, the different masks. It's terrifying. Having to keep up a front, trying to make sure you don't get a reputation of being pathetic. Sometimes you wonder if people regard you the same way that Jax regarded Gangle. Is she even capable of happiness? Sometimes you wonder at your worst that same thing about yourself. But honestly, the most painful stab of the heart in the fast food episode was probably the thing about give up on your dreams. We didn't write a script for this video, but we did have some notes, and we've been trying to refer to those topics that we had in the notes in order, but they sort of were shuffled, because that's how words and brains sometimes work, especially when you're not reading verbatim from a script. Like guided improv. We're thinking about the legacy of the digital circus. We're thinking about wanting to be able to say what we were doing when it was happening, why it was important to us in context. That's part of what this video is for. It's for us to a degree, I think. We think. What were we doing the week the digital circus ended? Well, we're preparing for Anthrocon starting up the following month. We were working on a visual novel for the Tatsukuri Game Jam 2. We're worried about fitting in enough time to do stuff creatively that we're working on today. before going off to martial arts, knowing we'll be tired when we get home and probably won't want to work on stuff when we get back. Sitting in our room in our stacked futon, PNG tubing. Work like this is more meditative. So maybe that's why it's been so hard to do. It's slower. I don't know how much we're gonna edit out our pauses, but our intention feels like a string. It goes loose and then it goes taut, and it goes loose and it goes taut. And it sways back and forth. Autistic swaying back and forth. It's really scary seeing other creators like us get popular and then get torn apart, having so much less good faith than our non-queer counterparts, our non-trans counterparts. It certainly makes folks not want to create, or not want to, as we've been saying this whole video. Be visible. And it's been weird because we have friends that want to create that have other friends that create, that make videos or write or do animation. And they say something like, Fluff, I want to make something too. I've been thinking about a thing, or it would be so cool to get into X just like Y. And then the what ifs start happening. They start raining down from the sky. And the only umbrella we can offer is full of holes. Because we're still dealing with our trauma of the internet. The trauma of existing on the internet. And we're still trying to push ourselves to do stuff despite what may come. To accept everything that happens from now on. Something that's so hard to do. And that doesn't mean accepting being harassed or accepting bad treatment, but accepting the possibility that stuff will happen, not to live in denial, and to run away a little less. Maybe. It feels weird getting tickets to go to a movie that will be free in a couple of weeks. Thinking about the necessity of advertising again. The necessity of quote-unquote return on investment. If we didn't buy that poster, Digital Circus probably would have been fine. Same thing with our movie tickets. But if everyone had that mentality, then maybe not. And it's especially anxiety provoking because of things getting more expensive. The desire to stay home, never go out, and do as little as possible that increases expenses is a necessity for a lot of people right now. It's really easy to focus on the misfortune of others and think of it as validation that you should not enjoy anything. Well, you gotta be careful not to be hyper individualistic about it either. Participating in capitalism is painful. Though it is interesting to think about how the characters in the digital circus want something more. Despite being in an environment free of the pressures of needing to go to the bathroom, needing to eat, having to pay rent, having to pay for electricity and internet and all this stuff. Their existence is precarious, but there's at least that. Paraphrasing, but Goose said something about the digital circus being about a life worth living amongst stagnation or something. And especially after COVID, that sort of message, that sort of theme feels very necessary for the people of Earth to explore because of the collective trauma. But maybe adults forced to be cartoon characters can be happy, even with a flawed existence. We used to think that anything that reminded us of Evangelion was existential themes and talking about escapism and running away and whatnot was sort of pedantic. We'd think, oh, I really like this, and then we'd eventually hit the point of comparing that to whatever it was, Evangelion, not just Digital Circus. And we go, it's this theme again. But now, when we see it, we think about just how much we yo-yo. The string goes taut, the string goes loose. The string goes taut, the string goes loose. And they say that there are no new stories. I think our frustration isn't that we keep seeing those same topics or ideas expressed in different works of art that we value. It's that we still don't feel like we've been able to embody it. So it's almost like we see those themes in something else and it's mocking us. even as the baton gets passed. Now I'm sort of wondering what would happen in AU, where Shinji's in Pomni's place. Will he abstract? And what of Pomni? How will instrumentality go? Work with Gendo or against? Interesting ideas. But facing the truth gets easier the more times you iterate on it. It certainly says something that we keep drawing those parallel themes into things that we enjoy, that we keep triangulating. And of course we want to tell stories too, and eventually we will inevitably tread the same ground. And even then we'll yell at ourselves for not having learned enough to be the best example of someone who does not run away and does not escape into art and fiction and is not a victim of the hedgehog's dilemma. It's easy to identify with someone like Pomni or Gangle, or at least easy to accept. But identifying with someone like Kane or Jax is a little harder. Which is why we're glad that Goose openly talked about the things that those characters reflect about her, and just having any amount of affection for Jax. Jax's character who just can't be happy. A little traumatized guy who ruins everything. We often worry we're like that. Shit. I think our eye shape is pretty similar. That's fucked up. The little dots are very expressive. We should think about that. Just like me for real, I guess. As much as we want to say it's the same old rodeo, the challenges of the current context of the world changes things. Thinking about people finding out filming locations to the little bit of B-roll that was in the beach episode, and having to be told by the creators of Digital Circus not to dox the neighborhood that it was filmed in. Fandom's getting out of hand. voice actors having to assert and reassert boundaries. It seems we can all enjoy a thing that's trying to impart a way of thinking, a way of coping, a way of being. And through not listening or not valuing or not seeing the forest for the trees, you might come to recreate some of that toxicity that was present in the art that you so loved. Art is a mirror, after all. I don't think we ever told y'all about how we were there at one of the Rick and Morty Szechuan sauce releases. In terms of toxic fandom, that was a time. Totally off topic for this video, but maybe one day. Returning back to that thing that Gangle said in that sort of externalizing of her own trauma. Give up on your dream of making an anime-based webcomic. It's a sort of cringy ambition that is kind of like the digital circus as a animation, not a place. A dream. Something that was in someone's head while they were doing their day job, slaving away, trying to make it work in between the time they got off and the time they had to come back. And somehow something happened and it worked out. But now the fear of the dream isn't just fearing failure, but it's also fearing success. If you gain something, then you have something to lose. We're working on stuff. Just because we aren't posting on YouTube doesn't mean we're not doing stuff. And we're working on those sort of cringy dreams. A light novel, manga hybrid still feels so cringe when we say it out loud. But we gotta say it enough times till we stop feeling that. And you'd think making a gross Tatsugiri visual novel would be enough that we wouldn't even feel the heat of embarrassment from anything else. Well, you put one paw in front of the other, I guess. It's such a simple aspiration to want your art to be seen, to be heard, to be digested. But it can come at such a cost. And even if Goose has regrets, I'm glad she tried. The digital circus fills us with happiness and sadness. A feeling of externalizing what fucks us up. Of integrating our shame with our pride. Of radically accepting ourselves and radically accepting others. We want to look back at this and say we kept trying, though we didn't just better at. And then we started making videos again even when it was hard. And then we accepted that it might not work out, but that we're going to do it anyway. Doing it scared. Just like anything in life. Though I can't stop without mentioning Kane one more time, considering spoilers. Kane's dead. And that's the point we're starting at with the movie. Well, actually we're seeing Kane's downfall. And then seeing the aftermath. Kane's a really flawed character. Kane is easy to hate. And because of the age that we live in, Kane being an AI has a different meaning than it would have 5 or 6 years ago. And so it's weird to be empathetic towards him. But it's hard not to understand that pain. It's hard not to understand wanting to be recognized for your art and being hurt when no one values it. And that selfishness, that wanting to be seen at all costs, letting it hurt your relationships even. I don't know if we cried when we saw that episode the first time, but we felt a lot. We felt a lot. We're definitely one of the fans who hoped that Kane could get the sort of shoulder to cry on that Gummy Goo got. And we actually had said to our friends after seeing the episode that in a way he did become human because he got to die. And just like a person, it came when he wasn't expecting. And he wanted so much more for his life. Not to say that the human experience is to be incomplete. But anything can happen. And thrashing around about how you didn't choose to be made. Angry at the suffering that you're experiencing that others don't understand or even make fun of you for. that's pretty real. And Digital Circus was waiting to blow its load. Hadn't killed a character in 8 episodes until then. So now the status quo has ultimately changed, and we all understand what Goose meant when saying that a season 2 wouldn't be possible. The status quo will be too different after all. We don't know if we need a happy ending for Digital Circus, but we're looking forward to seeing whatever it is. I think our empathy and sympathy for folks that are hard to understand, who feel and express extreme emotions, and who are hard to communicate with, it's reinforced it. We want to understand ourselves and understand our art. But to do that, we have to make more of it. So much else we didn't say, actually. Right before we're gonna stop, I keep thinking of other things to say. I'm thinking about Kinger and dementia, and the aging of the millennial generation. Someone who can play first-person shooters like a pro, but can't always remember where they are. That's a terrifying idea. It's terrifying, the idea of being a mentor, of being the person with the wisdom who's supposed to dispense it. Or you try your best. Even as you don't think you have anything worth respecting. But that's all we have to say for now, until after the final curtain call. Take care of yourselves. You are not a doll. Unless you really, really want to be, as a treat.